All right. Well, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I love all the good morning messages in the chat. It's wonderful to be here with you. So similar information that you have heard the last 2 days, we want to make sure to give credit where credit is due. So the Strengthening Families Approach and Protective Factors Framework was introduced in 2003 by the Center for the Study of Social Policy. It's a research-informed, strength-based approach that prevents child abuse and neglect by focusing on the well-being of all families and helping families to identify and build on their own protective factors. The Doris Duke Charitable Foundation funded the original research and also funded the Network of Alliance to engage the Children's Trust and Prevention Funds to demonstrate unique and innovative ways to implement the Protective Factors Framework. So welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Sarelson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Children's Trust Fund and Prevent Child Abuse Wyoming. Our question this morning is one thing that we love about our job. So if you could take a moment and put your name, where it is in Wyoming that you are, and one thing that you love about your job in the chat box, that would be great. I will share with you that the thing that I love the most is meeting incredible people across the state, doing all kinds of things for families and children. But those connections are just priceless to me. And I love working and meeting all of the people across Wyoming. I'll let my co-presenter introduce herself.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm Nicole Nieder. I'm the Business Office Coordinator at the Trust Fund. And I think one thing I love about my job is seeing all the new and innovative ways that people are discovering help families, really thinking outside the box and just getting those services to the families.
Great. And I see some good ones in the chat box. Love working with people in my community, love helping people, love working with all the wonderful families in our school district, helping reduce the stress of families in crisis, and on and on. They're coming in very fast. So keep those coming. It's a great way to start the morning hearing about all of the wonderful things that you get to do and why it is that you love the work that you are doing. So today's presentation covers some topics that may elicit an emotional response. Be sure that you're going to listen to yourself, take a break if you need to, and remember that self-care is an important part of being able to take care of others. And as we have said, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. So thank you so much for being part of this series this first week of April. There are 3 common and important threads that run throughout this entire curriculum. So you may recall these from the Resilience and also the Social Connections webinars. They are understanding and communicating the importance of how to use the framework as we go about our everyday work. The importance of culture and how culture impacts families as they seek to build protective factors, and how our own culture shapes how we individually feel, act, and think, and the critical role that parents play in strengthening families, viewing parents as valuable partners in every phase of the work that we do. The Strengthening Families Protective Factors Framework is not another program to add to any to-do list. It doesn't come with detailed instructions for implementation. It's an approach to working with families that can be interpreted and applied in a variety of settings. And in most cases, strengthening families is implemented through a series of small but significant changes to our daily practice, rather than large-scale program modifications. This training is designed to be used with anyone who works with children and families in any field. It offers a mix of examples from early care and education settings, child welfare settings, and family interactions. No matter where you work with children and families, it falls within the spectrum of various systems. It's important to view the building of protective factors in this holistic manner. This slide should look familiar. The lens that we encourage you to look at families through is a strength-based lens. We want you to focus on what is strong in families and not what's wrong with families. Strength-based theory does not mean that we ignore weaknesses and problems. Finding solutions to problems and addressing the risk factors in families is important. It prevents failure and helps families to survive. But we know that if we singularly focus on fixing, families will always be in survival mode. If we want families to thrive, we have to concentrate on what families are doing well and build upon that. We have to look at families through a different lens and focus on what's strong so that they can survive. All right, so this slide, it's very easy to look at and pick out some things that we would be concerned about. But we're going to use that different lens and we're going to identify 3 family strengths that you see in here. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to put your pieces in the chat box, but I don't want you to press send yet. So I'm going to give you just a moment. Identify at least 3 family strengths that are happening in this picture. They can be little things, they can be big things. If you look really hard, there's some really special things happening. You're going to put those 3 things in the chat box, but don't press send yet. We're going to do it all together. So I'll give you just a moment to put it in the chat box. Your 3 things. Don't press enter yet. All right, I'm going to give you about 6 more seconds. All right, let's press enter. Put them in the chat box. Let's see what you have to say. Oh my goodness, look at all of these things. Fishing poles, they have a home, there's dishes that they've eaten on, electricity, artwork on the fridge, 2 parents, fishing poles. I love that the fishing poles are such a strength. Absolutely, they are in my house too. The dad is engaging positively. They have food and furniture. The child looks happy. Absolutely. What a wonderful way to look at this picture and see all of the things that this family has and what it is that they're doing together. So this series takes a look into each of the protective factors. Today's focus is on knowledge of parenting and child development. Each of the protective factors is essential, but most important is what they do together to build strength and stability in families. I do wonder if anyone is brave enough to come off of mute this morning and answer the question, what comes to mind when you hear being a great parent is part natural and part learned? What does that mean to you? You, of course, can use the chat box, but if anyone would like to unmute and has had their coffee this morning, I would love to hear from you.
To me, it means the natural part is just kind of the nurturing, the empathy, the things that come just through being a parent. And then the part learned is to not keep repeating the same mistakes that you've made and to reach out and look for different ways to parent if what you're doing isn't working. There's so much to learn, but there's also so much that just comes from in you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I saw a couple others that were maybe willing to also come off of mute, and I see a couple more in the chat box. Anybody else want to share this morning? What comes to mind? Part natural, part learned. I love these. Nobody is born an expert. There's room to grow and build on. We do the best that we can, and when we know better, we do better. Parents learn from their mistakes. It might be hard to be a parent if you didn't have an example. I think some of it comes to the roles that we all play in working with parents as well, right? Some of it's natural, but some of it is learned. So just like any other role that we have stepped into, you take some of your experiences with you, and then you need some lessons to be able to help you to do some of the pieces that maybe you're not sure about. Parents love their children. They may not recognize if they're doing something wrong. Absolutely. All right, we asked this question yesterday, and I'm going to ask it again this morning. Raise your Zoom hand if you've previously had training in ACEs. This is one of my most favorite questions because I get to see how much knowledge is happening across the state in adverse childhood experiences. So if you have had training in adverse childhood experiences, raise your Zoom hand. This is great. All right, so the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study had thus far been the largest and most influential study about the relationship between negative experiences children have and those long-term effects those experiences may have on them as adults. The study found that children exposed to significant risk factors like abuse and neglect, and other family dysfunctions are far more likely to suffer from health risks like chronic respiratory problems, substance or alcohol addiction, depression, adolescent pregnancies, and even early death. This study, perhaps more than any other group, changed the way that physicians, therapists, social workers, and other clinicians look at childhood trauma. Although the ACE study revealed legitimate connections between childhood trauma and those adult health issues, there are a vast number of people who, despite their earlier experiences, have none of these poor results. Recent research supports the fact that protective factors like positive influences in children's lives can eliminate potential negative outcomes in adults. We're going to listen to a clip from Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. If you have not seen her TED Talks, I would recommend that you put them on the list and write down right now her name, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She has some incredible pieces. She's a pediatrician in California and has done a lot of research in adverse childhood experiences. But we're going to listen just to a clip about some brain development before we jump into the rest.
We now understand better than we ever have before how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. How does it work? Well, imagine you're walking in the forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland that says, release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. And it goes from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health-damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed.
That's important as we're thinking about child development to understand how maltreatment affects those pieces. The early years of a child's life are so very important for those later health and development. One of the main reasons is how fast the brain grows, starting before birth and then continuing into early childhood. Although the brain continues to develop and change into adulthood, the first 8 years can build a foundation for future learning, health, and life success. Screening, early identification, and linking to services can prevent vulnerable children, those at risk for or with a developmental delay, from progressing to levels of higher risk. Nurturing and responsive care for the child's body and mind is the key to supporting healthy brain development. Positive or negative experiences add up to shape a child's development and can have those lifelong effects. To nurture their child's body and mind, parents and caregivers need support and the right resources. The right care for children, starting before birth and continuing through childhood, ensures that the child's brain grows well and reaches its full potential. I'm going to drop for you a link here, an article from the CDC. Oh, I tried to send it just to, there we go. Oh, thanks, Nicole. Who would send it to the waiting room and there's no one in the waiting room. All right. So every interaction with a baby is an opportunity to boost brain development. Singing, reading, playing, interacting, and connecting all have those long-term positive effects on child development. Childhood play stimulates the brain to make connections between nerve cells. That's why we often hear that child's play is child's work. This is what helps a child to develop both gross motor skills, walking, running, jumping, coordination, and fine motor skills, writing, manipulating small tools, detailed handwork. It all happens through play. So what is knowledge of parenting? Parents understanding their role in their children's lives. And when parents understand their role and have specific techniques and strategies, they have the tools to respond appropriately to typical child behaviors and form a positive relationship with their child. Parent behaviors then lead to that early, secure attachment. Parents having knowledge of basic child development helps them to know what to do, to be able to have appropriate developmental expectations, to implement positive discipline techniques, and recognizing and attending to the special needs of their individual child. And then parents will know the importance of certain things in their children's lives. Parents who have some knowledge of basic child development are likely to have more realistic expectations of their children. And with that knowledge, parents are better able to provide an appropriate amount of nurturing, supervision, and guidance. I have another handout here for you. Thanks so much, Nicole. All right, so we talked just a tiny bit yesterday about use of phones and social media, but thinking about how things are different perhaps today than when maybe you were first a parent, if you were a parent many years ago, or how your parents parented you differently than how parenting is done today. What is different about parenting today versus maybe 20 years ago or 40 years ago or 60 years ago? What comes to mind? What is different? Feel free to come off of chat or off of mute, sorry, or put it in the chat. What is different today than what it used to be? Some people say the good old days and some people say just the old days. Stacey?
I feel like what's different for me is definitely my parents didn't keep as close of an eye on us. We were out running wild and crazy all day out in the pasture, catching frogs, doing the things, we didn't have street lights, so there was no come home when the lights get on. And I feel like kids need more opportunity to explore their world. And I think they don't get as much of that opportunity now.
Yeah, great example. What else comes to mind?
Well, I'm of the generation where they had to remind parents at 10 o'clock to know where your children are. And so I think that's a big difference now. I know with my own children, they're adults now, but that being able to teach them to be themselves and to check in with me, whereas my mom was more of a micromanager, to say the least. But I think that's a big difference between my mom's parenting style and mine. Is I'm more of the love and logic mindset, where my mom was more of a micromanager mindset.
Yeah, great example. Thank you. What else? What else comes to mind when we think about Brittany?
No, I was going to share that something that is different from when I was a kid is that I have open communication with my children. There is no topic that is off limits, and it's been that way all of her life. And that is not something I had growing up. There were topics that you couldn't discuss with your parents, or they didn't make it feel safe to do so. And so to me, just the change in open communication.
Yeah, what a great example. Anybody else have something that came to mind? Children are now being seen as deserving respect and understanding instead of a child should be seen and not heard. More awareness around emotional needs. Fathers are more involved. Head of household duties and child rearing is split more evenly. What a great point.
I think another
Absolutely.
thing that I see is kids who are different, kids who stand out, who are not neurotypical or what have you, are embraced and accepted more in society now, I believe, than they were back in the 70s when I was growing up. So there's more understanding of different personalities now.
Yeah, what a wonderful thing. Thank you. Yeah, we talk a lot about the good old days, but what you all mentioned were wonderful things that have grown and changed and adapted as people have learned more about people and just about parenting. Where is it that most people get their parenting information today? And is that different than how it used to be? Does everybody still read What to Expect When You're Expecting? That was, the book that was being read 20 some years ago when I was having babies. And so, thinking about where do you get your information? From your own parents. Now there's new advice at everyone's fingertips. TikTok, YouTube. Yeah, I think we've learned a lot from social media. We've learned things that you don't want to do and things that you do want to do, and there's a lot of information. Outside sources. Yeah, the book is very helpful. Absolutely. But it's important to think about some of those changes as we're talking about how do we support new parents or parents through different stages. The way that they get their information is probably different than how we got our information if we parented even 5 or 10 years ago, starting parenting, and how things have changed and evolved, and being open to what kinds of different sources are out there and available, and what parts of it could be good and what parts not so great. All right, let's see here.
I love seeing the world in their eyes. But when I can't spend time with them, I do feel like I let them down sometimes.
I didn't know how hard work it was until I actually had to do it on my own.
I failed, I think, on a daily basis to live up to my own expectations. I question whether I'm doing a good job every day.
The boundary's too loose, what is right, what is wrong, and you get inundated with all of this information about how to do it and what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong that you start to second guess yourself.
I wonder what he's thinking all the time or what he's feeling, because he doesn't really communicate all his feelings and emotions.
My dad passed away almost 2 years ago from cancer. Parents are the most important thing. I don't know how she thinks she's doing as a mother, but sometimes, you just don't really know the right words to say.
Dear Mom,
I often forget to tell you how much you mean to me.
you always taught me to stay positive, even when it feels like the world has fallen down around me.
I never really told you how much you mean to me.
And that's because there aren't words powerful enough to describe how much you mean to me. I admire your strength and courage. I love you so much. Love, Claire.
Dear Dad, the advice you gave me is to go to college, graduate, and be an honest person.
And I follow these principles and I will be well off. Okay. Great kid.
Dear Mom, thank you for being such an amazing mom.
When I grow up, I will always remember watching the sunset with you in Hawaii. And all the times you help me feel better when I'm having a bad day. Sorry.
But you always tell me to keep trying and that I can do it.
One of the hardest times was when my friends left me.
I felt useless and unwanted. But even at that time, you supported me. I couldn't have a better mom. Love, Zoe.
This means a lot to me.
Makes me feel like I've done a really good job. So maybe I think I'm only doing a 7, but if you get a kid to write a letter like this, it's got to be closer to 10. Oh, honey.
Brought tears to your old dad's eyes.
So this one is definitely a tearjerker. And it's one of those things that being able to see how important that connection is and witnessing those experiences and the power that we all have to be able to share that and to be able to highlight it with the parents that we're working with is an area that we can really pull out in those interactions that we're doing with them. And that it is the little stuff. It's the watching the sunset. It's the little piece of advice. It's those little pieces that when parents are really struggling, those are the things that the kids remember, right? And so those are the pieces that when we have a hard time and the situation is a crisis, they're still there. They're still trying. They're still doing those pieces. That's why it matters. Those are the things that count. All right, so the graphic on the left side was created by the Alliance of the National Parent Partnership Council. So this document and then other materials can be downloaded from their website. We'll drop that link into the chat. And they have some great ideas of some concrete examples. Some of those everyday actions that you can take: modeling developmentally appropriate interactions with children, providing opportunities to try out new parenting strategies, providing information and resources on parenting and child development, encouraging exploration of parenting issues or concerns, and addressing parenting issues from a strength-based perspective. It all makes such a difference, the work that you're doing with families and children.
Yeah, I became a father at a very young age of 17. And I immediately learned that I really didn't possess the knowledge or the skills to be a good dad. I was a dad, but I realized that I wasn't a good dad because I had no information on how to become a great dad or a good dad. 2006, I lost a daughter to youth violence, and that was a really hard time for me. And I was immediately at that point introduced to a program, Parents Anonymous, and I think that was the turning point of my life, because I became more involved and I wanted to be more educated about parenting. And they put me in a position where, they taught me rules. There are rules and there's laws into parenting, which I had no idea what they were. It wasn't until I actually went to my first meeting with Parents Anonymous when I learned about first rules and second rules of parenting, which I had no idea. And staying calm was the first rule of parenting, which I had not a clue that was a rule. Because I was just going by what's been taught to me over the years, and suddenly I realized that was not very, very helpful. And it wasn't until I really started to understand that monitoring your children is very, very important. And through Parents Anonymous and seeking information, I was learning to watch my kids a little closer and watch for telltale signs that normal kids go through. And what I realized, that kids lie. And they and through the education and the 5 protective factors, I learned that my kids lie, and I picked up how to monitor that. And both of my kids have telltale signs, and when they lie, my oldest son, he winks when he lies, and and my younger son, he twiddles his fingers, and it was because of the information that I received through these programs gave me the ability to pick these things up, and it's been such a joy and for me, and it's taught me that once you understand what you're supposed to do as a parent and you learn the rules of parenting, it becomes much, much easier, not only for you, but for your children. And they know that.
Parents need information that will help them understand the reasons behind their child's behavior, techniques to manage those behaviors and guide development, and perspective to put their child's behavior in the context of overall development and what is typical. When children exhibit especially challenging behaviors, their parents may need additional support to understand and handle them. It's important to understand culture, as it can vary widely. In the United States, our mainstream culture values individuality and independence. These values encourage having babies sleep alone, almost from birth. But in India, children grow up sleeping in the same room with their parents for the first 10 or 12 years of their life. Those from India may view mainstream American infant sleep practice as incredibly harsh and even abusive. Because dependence on family is a value of Japanese culture, Japanese parents may want to teach their children to rely upon family members. The parents may spoon feed their children through their preschool years. This can be very surprising to people from the US who encourage young toddlers, often from 12 months of age on, to learn to feed themselves. Whether parents encourage self-feeding or feed their children, they are expressing love and nurturing by offering nourishing and enjoyable food to their children. In many countries, babies don't wear diapers. Instead, mothers learn to recognize when their babies need to urinate or defecate, and they hold them over a toilet and gently encourage them to do so. If the baby does not eliminate or has an accident at another time, it's accepted without anger or distress. Eventually, the babies learn to take care of those bodily functions without their parents' help, usually between ages 18 and 28 months. But in the US, toilet training is considered a relatively brief process and is usually done later in the child's life. Most parents keep their babies and young children in diapers until they show an interest in using the toilet or need to be toilet trained to start preschool. A parent from another culture talking about toilet training a young baby might be misunderstood by many Americans. A protective factor is a characteristic that makes a parent, child, or family more likely to thrive and less likely to experience a negative outcome. A protective factor is like the flip side of a risk factor. You can also think of protective factors as what children and families thrive despite whatever risk factors they are facing. Think about how this protective factor, the knowledge of parenting and child development, fits into the framework. There are specific strategies and everyday actions we can take to help build the knowledge of parenting and child development protective factor. In this case, strengthening parenting is the strategy used to promote knowledge of parenting and child development. Simple, everyday actions can reinforce basic understanding of this protective factor in concrete ways that can support the physical, cognitive, language, and social and emotional development of young children. The Center for the Study of Social Policy has identified the following everyday actions that help support the knowledge of parenting and child development protective factor. First, model developmentally appropriate interactions with children. Provide information and resources on parenting and child development. Encourage the exploration of parenting issues or concerns. Provide opportunities to try out new parenting strategies. And address parenting issues from a strength-based perspective. In working with children and families, regardless of the setting, providers can take steps to strengthen parenting, provide guidance, role modeling, and information on parent and child development, including special support around children's challenging behaviors.
I'm constantly trying to create structure for Billy, even though he's only 2, because I know it's important. But man, is it hard. Hi, honey. I've made some changes to the family schedule, and I just wanted to run them by you so you can have a real 50,000-foot view of some of the changes we're going to be making in the way we do things here, okay? Yeah. He sometimes struggles when we move from one thing to another, and I'm trying to add some new activities to his day. So naturally, I'm thinking pie chart. This chart here represents how you and I typically spend our day, not including nap times and potty breaks, of course. And as you can see here, playtime figures significantly, nearly 34% of our daily activities. Are you with me? My job? Well, I work as a project manager team lead in a large marketing agency. Why do you ask? Now, based on the advice of a majority of childhood education researchers, as well as decades of collective experience of mothers all across the U.S., your current age, which is 2, is the ideal time to begin introducing simple words and simple sounds as a preamble to reading. Are you pooping? I know what you're thinking. I'm not being detailed enough, right? I knew it.
Thinking about what your routine or what you want your routine to look like ahead of time. Some parents like to post it, and maybe for young kids, you would associate a picture or a graphic to it. The simpler you make it, the more likely you can adhere to it. If it's too complicated and involves too many different steps, it's just setting it up for, for failure, and you don't want to do that. We want the structure, and the routine is supposed to promote success in the family.
Okay, hey, look, do you see? It's almost 5 o'clock, which means it's almost our new reading time. And then after reading time, you and I can go bake some cookies. What do you say?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mwah.
It's all about setting up expectations for your children. So letting them know what's coming next is really important. So yeah, you can have the 5-minute warning. Okay, in 5 minutes, we're gonna go up and take a bath. That's really important.
When we're done here, we're gonna go upstairs and get washed up for dinner. So 5 more minutes, okay?
Okay. One thing that kids understand easily is step-by-step instructions. So one way to communicate around a structure or routine is by saying, first we'll do this, and then we'll do this.
Okay, now, buddy, it's time for bed. It's really great. I feel like Billy and I are on the same page much more often now. He used to handle transitions really badly, but now he knows what's coming. See you in the morning, okay? Time for bed. Good night. Simplicity is the key. Simple and clear. In fact, I've started incorporating some of these simple and clear strategies into my life at work. It's going well. Okay, so you can see I've created some new visual materials to lead us through today's meeting. We'll be focusing on our client's new structure and how well it meshes with some of the projections that we made based on the marketing strategies that we developed at our last corporate retreat. But before we get started, why don't we take a short snack break? Then we'll begin in, we'll say 5 minutes. 5 minutes, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anybody need to use the potty?
So we wanted to hear from you on what your thoughts were on that video. What did you think was good about it? What do you think could be improved? Feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat. Yes, I agree, Sarah. More snack breaks. Those are always important. Okay, well, feel free to continue to put your ideas into the chat. Some questions are difficult for parents to ask. A safe environment is one that allows everyone to raise issues or express concerns without feeling embarrassed or uninformed. There are many opportunities to model developmentally appropriate interactions with children, provide information and resources on parenting and child development, encourage exploration of parenting issues and concerns, provide opportunities to try out new parenting strategies, and to address parenting issues from a strength-based perspective. Think about what are ways that you have found to share information with the parents that you work with about their child's development. Parenting is a complex process in which parents and children both impact one another. There are many reasons that parents behave the way they do. The multiple influences on parenting are still being explored. Proposed influences on parental behavior can include parent characteristics, the child's characteristics, and the contextual and sociocultural characteristics. Parents bring unique traits and qualities to the parenting relationship that affect their decisions as parents. These characteristics include a parent's age, their gender identity, personality, developmental history, beliefs, knowledge about parenting and child development, and mental and physical health. Parents' personalities also affect parenting behaviors. Parents who are more agreeable, conscientious, and outgoing are warmer and provide more structure to their children. Parents who are more agreeable, less anxious, and less negative also support their children's autonomy more than parents who are anxious and less agreeable. Parents who have these personality traits appear to be better able to respond to their children positively and provide a more consistent, structured environment for their children. Parents' developmental histories or their experiences as children can also affect their parenting strategies. Parents may learn parenting practices from their own parents. Fathers who own parents provided monitoring, consistent, and age-appropriate discipline and warmth are more likely to provide this constructive parenting to their own children. Patterns of negative parenting and ineffective discipline also appear from one generation to the next. However, parents who are dissatisfied with their primary caregiver's approach may be more likely to change their parenting methods when they have their own children. Parenting is bidirectional. Not only do parents and caregivers affect their children, but children influence their parents or primary caregivers as well. Child characteristics such as gender identity, birth order, temperament, and health status can affect child rearing behaviors and roles. For example, an infant with an easy temperament may enable caregivers to feel more effective, as they are easily able to soothe the child and elicit smiling and cooing. On the other hand, a cranky or a fussy infant can elicit fewer positive reactions from caregivers and may result in parents feeling less effective in their role. Over time, parents of more difficult children may become more punitive and less patient with their children. Many parents who have a fussy or difficult child have been found to be less satisfied with their relationships and to have greater challenges in balancing their work and family roles. Child temperament is one of the child characteristics that can influence how caregivers behave with their children. This slide offers some examples of trustworthy child development apps and online resources for parents. Feel free to do a screenshot or take a picture of the slide to reference this again. But feel free, we'll drop the links to all of these in the chat as well. The first is Essentials for Parenting Toddlers in Preschools, which is a free online resource developed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's designed for parents of 2 to 4-year-olds. Essentials for Parenting addresses the common parenting challenges like tantrums and whining. The resource provides information about ways parents can build positive, healthy relationships. The next website, onetoughjob.org, provides current, reliable, and practical information on a variety of parenting topics related to raising children from infancy, and it's an online resource for parents. The Children's Trust of Massachusetts created this One Tough Job to support parents by providing resources through adolescence. Next is Let's Play, and this was developed by 0 to 3, a national nonprofit organization focused on the healthy development of babies and toddlers. Let's Play provides parents and grandparents with fun ideas for keeping babies and toddlers entertained and learning, especially during daily routines like commuting time in the car, chores, bedtime or bath time, mealtime, and shopping. There are also some boredom busters for any time of the day. Parents can search activities by age, tag their favorites, and share these activities via social media. Lastly, Vroom is a website and app that turns shared moments into brain-building moments. Vroom was developed by a group of dedicated scientists, community leaders, and trusted brands with input from community organizations and families. Its purpose and intent is to provide parents and caregivers with ways to boost early learning. Parents who have some knowledge of basic child development are likely to have more realistic expectations of their children. With that knowledge, parents are better able to provide an appropriate amount of nurturing, supervision, and guidance. When parents understand their roles in their children's lives and learn about specific parenting techniques and strategies, they can form positive relationships with their children and have options for appropriate responses to typical child behaviors. Parents exhibit wide variations in their parenting skills and knowledge, and those variations can occur in the same family over time. For example, parents who handled infancy very well may struggle to adjust to their toddler's behaviors and need help with new techniques at that time. Strength in parenting, opportunities should be given to all parents to gain new information, techniques, and perspective as they make the effort to understand their children's behavior and their role as parents. Neither parents nor the professionals who work with them to care for and nurture their children always have the right answer. It's important to know where to go for information when parenting issues may be perplexing. It's also important to partner with parents to communicate that parenting is part natural and part learned. Parents from any cultural background can still benefit from learning new information, techniques, and perspective, as long as the new information is presented in a way that is respectful of their traditions and culture. We all make mistakes when we parent, but somehow our children still seem to flourish and to learn that we're not perfect.
So one of the things that we do in our personal lives is we try to combat not being enough by pleasing and performing and perfecting. We go through our lives trying to be who we think we're supposed to be, doing and saying what we think people want to hear, putting on whatever mask or face we think we need to put on for that moment. And what that leaves us is exhausted. When we're pleasing and perfecting and performing, we end up saying yes a lot when we mean no, right? And we also end up saying no when we mean, oh, heck yes, I want to do that. I really want to do that. And you know what? Even though I have a lot of work, I want to do it now. I don't want to do it 5 pounds from now. I don't want to do it when I'm great. I don't want to do it when I've practiced. I just want to do it now. But we don't have those boundaries when we don't feel like we're worthy and enough. I have this ring. I don't know if you can see it. It's got these little spinners on it, and I bought it for my 41st birthday, the one where I aged 21 years and 12 months. And it has spinners. And my whole new thing is when someone asks me to do something now, I spin my ring 3 times before I answer. And it's my boundary ring. And what I say to myself when I'm spinning it is very simple. And it's choose discomfort over resentment. Brene, can you bring 5 dozen cookies to school tomorrow? Nope. What happens when we say, sure, I'll be glad to bring the cookies up to the school? Like, if you know me, I'm looking at a friend that, one of my fellow PTO people, you know I'll go right into my very high voice. Sure, I would love to. Peanut free, right? And then what happens is you're home in your kitchen, and your kids want you to be kind and gentle with them, but you're like this. I hate these people. I hate these kids. I hope they choke on my cookie, you know? So how do we do things without resentment, you know? And it takes boundaries. So in the end, I think if we take away anything from the authenticity piece, it is about the courage to be imperfect, to be vulnerable, and to set boundaries. Because the whole idea of I am enough starts with enough.
So I love how Dr. Brene Brown discussed the problems that we face when we try to combat the feeling of not being enough by pleasing and performing for others. And her strategy for having the courage to be imperfect, to be vulnerable, and to set boundaries by choosing discomfort over resentment is super helpful. So we just have a 1-question survey for you to complete. It just provides some feedback on this webinar. I think, oh, yep, Sarah just dropped it in the chat. And we have another link for more information that we will also drop in the chat so that you can have that for reference in the future. But with that, Once you are done filling out that one question survey, that will conclude the webinar for today. We want to thank everybody for spending your morning with us. And please, if you are able to, join us for the next 2 days for the next 2 protective factors.